What did you do when you found out they were spying on you through the bathroom cameras? I remember storming into the manager's office, completely pissed off, shoving my laptop in his face and yelling, "What the hell is this?" He froze, just stared at the screen for a few seconds and couldn't get a word out. I live out in the absolute middle of nowhere. The closest school was about 30 miles away, so my parents decided it would be easier if I stayed in the dorms. There really wasn't any other option. Commuting every day would have meant waking up at 5 a.m. and getting home late at night. That would have killed me pretty quick. Dorm life wasn't great either. Non-stop noise, no privacy, endless lines for the bathroom. But at least I could focus on school and my passion. That passion was YouTube. I used to make Minecraft videos. Nothing huge, but to me, it was everything. On weekends, when I went home, I'd record a bunch of episodes, then spend the whole week in the dorm editing them at night. The internet there was garbage. Half the websites were blocked, and even when something did load, it was slower than dial-up from the 90s. So I often just tethered my iPhone dot, and that's when it all started. One night, I went to connect my laptop to my iPhone's hotspot. I clicked the Wi-Fi icon, and I see two networks pop up. My usual one, iPhone Cuba, and another one I'd never seen before. Its name, Camera Toaleta WC, Bathroom Camera WC. I just froze. At first, I thought it had to be some dumb joke from one of the guys. Anyone can rename their hotspot like that. But something in me felt off, like this wasn't a joke. I figured I'd check it out later, when the hallways were quiet. So later. That night, when the dorm had settled down, I opened my laptop again. The network was still there. Same name. This wasn't some quick prank. That's when my stomach dropped, because directly below my room was the girls' bathroom with showers. Luckily, I was in the computer science track at school, so I knew a few tricks. I'd messed around with cracking Wi-Fi before, so I tried it here, and it worked. I got in. Then I typed in the IP address that popped up. First, a login screen. Then, after a moment, video feed. I froze. It was like a live stream from a hidden camera. The angle was weird, like from the corner of the ceiling. The picture was grainy, crappy quality, but clear enough to see the girls. I could see them showering, changing into their pajamas. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't a joke. This was a real hidden camera. I didn't want to watch it. I didn't want anything to do with it, but I knew I needed proof. So I quickly turned on screen recording, logged back in, and captured everything I saw. Otherwise, no one would ever believe me. That's when I remembered the rumors. People had been whispering for a while that the dorm manager had some creepy tendencies. I'd always thought it was just gossip, but now it felt real. The next morning, before he even had time to change clothes, I burst into his office. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I opened my laptop, played the recording, and practically screamed, "What the hell is this?" He looked at the screen, froze, stayed silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed and said, "Cuba, you can't be watching in the dorm. This isn't funny." I yelled back, "Those are our classmates." That's when his face went serious. His whole expression hardened, and then he started saying things I never expected to hear. When the manager finally got serious, the whole office went dead quiet. He put down the pen he'd been scribbling with, leaned back in his chair, and gave me this look, like he suddenly realized what I'd seen was way more serious than he'd wanted to admit at first. Before he said anything, he got up, walked to the door, and turned the key in the lock. That scared the hell out of me, because for a second, I thought he was going to try to intimidate me into keeping quiet. But instead, he sat back down at his desk and said, "Cuba, I locked it so nobody walks in. If word gets out about this, all hell will break loose." I swallowed hard, my eyes glued to the laptop screen. I didn't know if I could trust him, or if maybe he was the one behind it all. He sighed, looked up at the ceiling, and said something I never expected. He told me they'd had suspicions for a while that someone was spying on the girls in the bathrooms, but they never had proof. Just rumors, little hints, nothing concrete. And what I had recorded was the first real evidence that someone had actually installed a camera. He said it calmly, but I could hear the tension in his voice. This was massive, something that could destroy the dorm's reputation. I asked him straight up if it was him. He looked at me in a way that made me feel stupid for even asking. He didn't answer right away. He just rested his hands on the desk and said, "I get why you'd suspect me, but think about it. If it was me, do you really think I'd let you walk in here with that recording? Do you think I'd let you keep it? It's not me, Cuba." But even with his answer, I didn't feel any relief. I needed to know what was going to happen next. I asked him, "So what do we do about this?" That's when he stood up and started pacing the room like he was trying to piece his thoughts together. He said it had to be reported to the police, but we needed to be careful not to cause a panic. If the students, especially the girls, found out they'd been secretly watched for months, it would explode into a scandal that would rock the entire community. I couldn't take it anymore and cut him off. I told him it was already a scandal, and trying to cover it up would only make it worse. That's when he snapped at me, told me to calm down, that I didn't understand how serious the consequences could be, that the dorm could be shut down, parents would lose trust in the school, the media would turn it into a circus. I just stared at him, stunned. To me, it was simple. Someone had planted a camera in the girls' bathroom. Someone had been spying on our classmates. The only thing that mattered was catching whoever did it. But to him, at least at first glance, the biggest concern was how it would affect the dorm's reputation and his own position. I didn't hand over the recording right away. I felt like I needed to keep it, to have something solid in my hands, something they couldn't just sweep under the rug. He could tell I wasn't going to back down, so he sat back down, defeated, and told me to do what I thought was right. But he begged me not to spread it around, at least for now. He said that once the police got involved, the truth would come out anyway, but we had to give them time to act. So we sat there across from each other. Him resigned, me furious, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. I knew right then nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel it in my gut. This story was just getting started, and what I'd seen on that screen the night before was only the beginning of something much bigger. asterisk. I walked out of the manager's office with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat, like I'd just finished the biggest exam of my life. I had no idea if I'd just done the right thing, or if I'd stepped into a mess I'd never get out of. All I wanted was to crawl back to my room, crash on my bed, shut my brain off, and pretend this was just a nightmare. But of course, that wasn't possible. The dorm had its own rules. Nothing ever stayed secret for long. All it took was one person seeing me leave the manager's office with my laptop under my arm, and the whispers started. By the time I hit the hallway, guys from the room next door were already asking why I'd been with the head so early in the morning. I gave them some vague excuse about technical stuff, but their looks said it all. They didn't buy it for a second. It didn't even take half a day before rumors started flying. At first, I only caught bits and pieces. Someone saying, Cuba recorded something, and then someone else adding something about the girls. By that evening, there was no doubt anymore. The whole school was buzzing with talk that someone had installed a camera in the girls' bathroom. I don't know who spilled it, but I suspect it was the manager himself. Despite all his talk about keeping it quiet, he must have said something to the wrong person. Or maybe one of the teachers he told couldn't keep their mouth shut. Or hell, maybe someone overheard us through the door. Doesn't matter. How the damage was done. What happened in the dorm over the next few days felt like a nightmare. The girls walked around with red, tear-stained eyes. Some locked themselves in their rooms and wouldn't talk to anyone. A few just packed up their stuff and went home, even though there were still months left in the school year. Their parents showed up in the middle of the day, furious, screaming at the manager, the teachers, the whole school. In the halls, suspicions spread like wildfire. The guys whispered about who might have done it, and the theories got darker and nastier by the hour. Some blamed the manager, others the janitor, others still an older student. Everyone was looking at everyone else with side eyes. And me? I felt their stares the hardest, because I was the one who found it. I was the one with the recording. I was the first person to see it. The girls started avoiding me. I could feel it in the way they looked at me, that in their eyes, I wasn't just a witness anymore, but someone tainted by the whole thing. They knew I'd seen the footage, knew it was on my laptop. I felt their hostility, even if they never said a word. That cut deeper than I wanted to admit. The manager tried to put out the fire, held meetings, kept repeating that the police were handling it, and the culprit would be caught. But nobody trusted him anymore. Every move, every word he spoke was dissected. Even people who used to think he was an okay guy now looked at him like he was guilty. The worst part was that the dorm itself started to crumble. The girls refused to use the bathrooms. They'd go to friends in town or sneak in for a shower in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep. The guys joked nervously that now we'd have to clean up ourselves because even the cleaning ladies were too scared to work here anymore. Parents were calling the school non-stop, threatening to pull their kids out if something wasn't done. And me? I drifted through the halls like a ghost. On one hand, I felt proud that I was the one who uncovered it, that I'd stopped this sick spying. But at the same time, I felt guilty, like I was part of it too. After all, I was the first to see the feed, the first to record it, the one who had it sitting on my computer. One night I couldn't sleep. I just sat on my bed, staring at my laptop, thinking about what would have happened if I'd never turned on my hotspot that night. If I'd never seen that twisted network name. Maybe the girls would have gone on being spied on for months, years even. Or maybe someone else would have stumbled across it, and the fallout would have been even uglier, even more brutal. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that there was no turning back now. A few days after the rumors had completely taken over the dorm, the police showed up. It was the weirdest feeling. This place that was usually full of laughter, noise, and the usual teenage drama suddenly felt like the set of a crime show. 2 officers walked into the manager's office, and behind them came a guy in plain clothes, a tech specialist, easy to spot with a laptop bag and cables sticking out of his pockets. They held a briefing. The manager gathered a handful of students, including me, and made it official. The case was in police hands now, and we were all expected to tell the truth and hold nothing back. He didn't look me in the eye, but I knew deep down this whole thing had started because of me and my recording. One of the cops asked me to hand over my laptop. It felt like I was giving away a piece of myself. That machine didn't just hold the evidence. It had my entire life on it. My videos, my projects, my YouTube stuff. The police tech plugged it in, skimmed through the recordings, then nodded. He said this was going to be key evidence. They also took the routers, checked the server room, and then started going around the dorm asking questions. I saw the girls answering with shaky voices while the guys tried to act like it was no big deal. But the truth was, we were all terrified. After a few hours, the plainclothes officer called me back into the office. I sat across from him, and he opened the laptop, looked straight at me, and said, Cuba, thanks to your recording, we managed to trace the device sending the signal. The camera was registered under the name Marek. I felt a wave of heat rush through me. There were 2 people in the dorm with that name. The manager sitting right next to me, and the janitor, the guy who was always walking around with tools, fixing leaky pipes and changing light bulbs. The manager looked at the cop and asked in a cold voice, so you're implying it might have been me? The officer just shrugged and said that at this stage of the investigation, nobody was being ruled out. I stayed quiet, but my head was spinning. On one hand, all the rumors about the manager came flooding back. On the other hand, the janitor had the easiest access to the bathrooms. He knew every corner of the building, and nobody questioned him when he went in. Then the police dug into the camera logs. Turned out the device had been online for months, and every login attempt had been recorded, like a flight log. Who connected and when. That's when the breakthrough came. The records showed the camera had been bought and registered at the exact time the manager was on vacation. They double-checked everything. Documents, tickets, even signed school paperwork. There was no way he could have done it. When I heard that, I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I felt like maybe he'd been telling the truth all along, but that meant the only real suspect left was the janitor. The police called him in for questioning. He sat in the office looking awkward, nervous. He swore up and down he had nothing to do with it, that it had to be some mistake, that he only fixed toilets and didn't know anything about computers. But anyone with even basic tech knowledge could tell he was lying. The plainclothes officer pulled out a sheet of paper with the logs and said the connections to the camera happened regularly at night, always after hours, always when the janitor was in the building alone. He started tripping over his own words. First, he said he had no idea what they were talking about. Then, that maybe someone had planted the device on him. Finally, that he just didn't remember. But when they showed him the logs, the dates, the times, the proof, he cracked. His face went pale. He dropped his head and admitted it. He was the one who had installed the camera. He said he did it for himself, that nobody else was involved, that he just wanted to watch. Every word out of his mouth was like a disgusting punch to the gut. I looked at him and couldn't believe it. That this man, the guy we passed every day in the halls, the one who replaced our light bulbs, cleaned the floors, helped fix things, was capable of something so twisted. The cops cuffed him and led him out of the building. The hallway erupted in whispers, clusters of students huddling together. The girls looked sickened, some of them crying. We all felt it, that a chapter had just ended, but it had left behind a deep, ugly wound. The dorm was never the same again. They led the janitor out of the dorm in handcuffs through the main entrance, and a crowd of students followed behind. Nobody spoke out loud, just whispers, the occasional gasp, someone covering their mouth, someone else recording the whole scene on their phone. His face was completely blank, like it hadn't even hit him yet that this was the end. The cops shoved him into the squad car, the doors slammed shut, and it drove away. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like someone had hit mute on the world. But it was only the silence before the storm. The very next day, TV crews showed up at the dorm. They stood at the gate with cameras, throwing questions at anyone who so much as paused to look. The manager tried to wave them off, saying the investigation was ongoing and nobody could give statements. But of course, that didn't stop them. Rumors mixed with facts, people started inventing their own versions of the story. The newspapers ran headlines about scandal in the school dorm and hidden cameras in girls' bathrooms. The parents lost it. At meetings, the atmosphere was like a battlefield. Screaming, swearing, threats. One father nearly lunged at the manager when he found out someone had filmed his daughter. Another mother sobbed openly, begging them to shut the dorm down because it had ruined her child. The girls didn't want to come back. Dozens of students packed up and left that same week, and some even transferred to other schools. In the hallways, trust was gone. The guys made half-joking comments that now anyone could be a suspect, but nobody actually laughed. Me, I felt torn apart. On one hand, I knew that if it hadn't been for me, this might never have come to light. On the other, I couldn't shake the guilt, like I was the one who brought this nightmare down on everyone. The girls looked at me suspiciously, like there was one question running through their heads. How much did he see? What exactly did he record? Could it leak? I tried talking to classmates a few times, but they brushed me off with short answers. When I walked down the hallway, conversations would stop dead. To them, I was no longer one of them. I was an outsider, someone who had touched the very thing they were all terrified of. One day, the manager came up to me after all the chaos and said, "Cuba, I know this is hard on you, but what you did took courage. If you hadn't uncovered it, that man would still be at it. Thanks to you, the truth came out." I looked at him, but in his eyes, I only saw exhaustion, like these days had aged him years. Maybe he really was innocent, or maybe he just played the part well. I never knew for sure. The dorm became a ghost town. In the cafeteria, fewer and fewer students showed up. In the hallways, footsteps echoed like in an empty warehouse. I could feel the building dying, trust shattered, no one wanting to stay there anymore. The police kept working the case, and eventually it went to trial. The janitor's name was everywhere, online, on the news, whispered during breaks. He became a monster in everyone's eyes, the face of shame and disgust. For us, who had seen him every single day, it was even harder to process. None of us could believe that this ordinary man, the one who smiled at us, asked if everything worked in our rooms, had been capable of something so vile. When the court sentenced him to several years in prison, there was a sense of relief, but it wasn't happiness. It felt more like resignation, like we all knew this wound would never heal. I graduated a few months later and went back to my YouTube channel. For a long time, I didn't talk about it, but I knew someday I had to. So I sat in front of the camera, hit record, and told the whole story from start to finish. It wasn't just another Minecraft video anymore. It was a real story, something that had actually happened. When I finished, I sat there in silence and thought about how one tiny detail, a Wi-Fi network name, had changed my entire life.